A lot of you who regularly follow news relating to the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea region have by now been well aware of the disgraceful, fake news that has been propagated recently about Eritrea, the Sudan, and Egypt. For those who haven't, here's a short recap. On January 2, 2018, Al Jazeera, a news outlet who has a history of propagating fake news and lies about Eritrea, reports of Egyptian troops, military hardware, and even suggesting military planes were in Sawa, Eritrea. Al Jazeera quotes its source for this fake news as coming from the lying capital in the Horn of Africa, from the country which finds itself in deep turmoil, Ethiopia. Lying is a poor tradition in today's Ethiopia, and is precisely one of the major reasons why the bruised and beaten regime finds itself on the brink of collapse. The following day, on the 3rd of January 2018, ERI-TV state media presented the whole Al Jazeera fake news about the non-existent Egyptian military presence in Sawa, as it is, and then simply referred to the fabricated news as cheap gossip that requires no further analysis or answers.
እዚ ሕሱር ወረ ዝኾነ ትንታነን መልስን ከም ዘይድልዮ ንኹሉ ርዱእን።
On 5th of January, the Eritrean Minister of Information tweeted the following: "For reasons better known to itself, Al Jazeera news channel seems to relish propagating false and preposterous news on Eritrea. Latest is phantom deployment of Egyptian troops/weapons." A few days later, Orthodox Christmas was celebrated at Sawa, and sources from the ground confirmed that there were no troops or Egyptian planes, just joyful Eritrean students and local guests enjoying themselves, which was also broadcasted on TV. Despite these facts, and the reality on the ground, Al Jazeera continued to propagate the lie that had already been disproven. It unashamedly continued to report of non-existent Egyptian troops in Eritrea. These are the type of relentless outright lies and propaganda that Eritrea and Eritreans had to deal with over the past decade. Nowadays it's becoming more fashionable to exclusively report on fake news and outright lies, especially when it comes to Eritrea. It's as if there's a competition on who can come up with the better lies.
Well, the African Union says it's hopeful the current standoff between Sudan and Eritrea will be resolved peacefully, and that the countries must consider resolving disputes without the use of force.
Here's a perfect example of trying to manufacture a crisis, desperately trying to create something out of nothing. What is this standoff? A standoff would require both countries to be going at each other. At the very least, the minimum sign of a standoff would be if both countries were throwing war of words at each other. This isn't the case.
The AU officials also said the Union will intervene if and when it's necessary, based on its governing principles.
What a joke! Who are these AU officials making such statements? How can the African Union make such statements on a non-existent dispute and hypothetical scenarios, while keeping absolute silence on the occupation of Eritrean territories by Ethiopia? Between 1998 to 2000, more than 120,000 Ethiopian soldiers lost their lives after Ethiopia declared war on Eritrea and invaded Eritrean land. 19,000 Eritreans also gave up their lives defending their country from this Ethiopian invasion. 2 years later, in 2002, a final and binding verdict was given, which confirmed the flashpoint of the so-called border dispute. The Eritrean town, Badme, which the Ethiopian regime invaded, belonged to Eritrea. More than 15 years later, Ethiopia, with the support of the previous US administrations, still to this day continues to occupy sovereign Eritrean territories, including Badme. The African Union, which was previously called the OAU, was one of the guarantors and witnesses present during the peace agreement signed between Eritrea and Ethiopia in 2000. The African Union has done nothing about this grave violation, in which it is a moral responsibility to take action and speak of the occupation of Eritrean territory by Ethiopia. For well over a decade it has done nothing about this, but yet it now is ready to intervene on non-existent dispute. What kind of sick joke is that?
CGTN's Girum Chala has more.
The border tension between Sudan and Eritrea is highly noticed here at the African Union Commission, and authorities here are following the unfoldings from Cairo to Asmara, from Khartoum to Addis Ababa almost on a daily basis. When asked if the AU will intervene, the official said ways of handling such situations is clearly stipulated on the constitutive act of the Union. The African Union can and will intervene if things escalate or if member states request its intervention. Also, the officials said, based on the Constitutive Act, disputes or conflicts between member states shall be resolved peacefully and amicably. The African Union prohibits the use of force or even the threat of using force against another member state. So for now, the African Union has chosen to monitor the happenings between Sudan and Eritrea closely and aspire to see leadership based on mutual interests from all sides. Group Jala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The African Union has been nothing more than a tool for outside forces, somewhat of a front organization. One of its use is being a label to be used in propaganda reports, as the one that we just witnessed. Now moving on to Sudan. Sudan at the moment is suffering from all sorts of problems, from armed internal conflicts, to the latest protest in the capital city Khartoum, over skyrocketing prices for basic commodities like bread. The Sudanese government had also declared a state of emergency last year in a number of states, with the Kassala state being one of them. Part of the reason for this state of emergency, they say, is to collect arms, unlicensed vehicles and stop smuggling of goods. To put this into effect, thousands of troops were deployed to Kassala state. On January 11th, the deputy chairman of the ruling National Congress Party, Ibrahim Ramaud Hamid, was quoted to have said, "The meeting of the leadership office of the National Congress Party has directed for continuation of security arrangements on Sudan's eastern borders after receiving information on potential security threats from Egypt and Eritrea at Sawa area. There are no such potential threats coming from Eritrea. As we have seen earlier on, there are no Egyptian presence in Sawa Eritrea. Relying on information and listening to and cozying up with the crumbling regime in Ethiopia, who also finds itself in deep crisis, is the worst thing that Sudanese officials can do at this moment. Creating imaginary threats from foreigners in order to distract people's attention from the internal problems won't solve anything. The only thing this lie of Egyptian troops in Sawa Eritrea has really done is further strengthen Egypt's relation with Eritrea. Imagine being the Egyptians and listening to Qatar-funded fake news experts, Al Jazeera, listening to news of your troops being in Eritrea when you know they're not. The only natural thing to do is go ahead and solidify and strengthen those relations with Eritrea. At the invitation of the Egyptian president, the Eritrean president visited Egypt, where he received a warm welcome, and the two discussed on further strengthening bilateral relations, growing trade and investment between the two countries, as well as discussing other things of mutual importance.
سلام دولة إريتريا سلام
Always remember, the number one rule when listening or reading negative news about Eritrea. Every negative news about Eritrea is 100% guaranteed filled with lies or propaganda, as we have witnessed over and over again throughout the years. As long as you follow this rule, you will never be fooled by any fake news regarding Eritrea, which there will be more fake news in the future, and the more fake news is published by the likes of Al Jazeera, the more credibility they lose. Always question more.
بدأوا حق